Hello everyone, week 3, Hermeneutics. Alright, so objectives and your reading as per usual is right there. Don't forget the audio that's in the Lesson 3 resource folder that you may simply click to read the script if you don't want to bother with the little videos. They're very short, but very important to read. The first thing I'm going to go over is the English grammar exam. You had details about the grammar exam and how to study and so forth in previous weeks. But when you do that, it is worth 24 points, and it is, how do I describe it? It's very short little exam. I'm going to tell you exactly how it's set up. It's 4 questions, but the first 2 questions are like lists of about 10 things that you're going to do matching for. So the first question is essentially this. Match the words or phrases in the following verse with the appropriate part of speech. So it's all about matching parts of speech. The words or phrases are listed on the left, so you're going to have a word or a phrase on the left-hand side, and then on the right are going to be a list of parts in speech, a list of parts of speech, like equitive verb, preposition, finite verb, object of the preposition, subordinating conjunction, coordinating conjunction, prepositional phrase, possessive pronoun, direct object, and verb or participle. So you're basically going to match that with a word or phrase from a verse that we will give you in the test. So as long as you're able to look at any given sentence or paragraph, part of scripture, and pick out those different parts of speech that I just listed off, you'll be good to go. And I think there's 10 of them there that you'll match. Then you're going to identify clauses. So the question on question 2 will be identify each of the following clauses as either dependent or independent. So you'll have like another 10 clauses on the left, and then you'll either mark them as an independent clause or a dependent clause. So you simply need to go back and study how to identify an independent and a dependent clause. So that's all that question 2 is identifying independent clauses. 3, the question is, and then real quick, why are these things important, right? We're just making sure that you understand when you're reading scripture, right? There's all different types of decisions that an interpreter makes when they're writing, for instance, an English translation of the Bible from the Greek or Hebrew. And when they're doing that, you're still able to identify what kind of part of speech something is, and then the clause that's giving, is it an independent or dependent clause? Knowing those things helps you discern what the author was intending, or where the priority of a certain word or phrase was in the intent of what the author was trying to communicate. So it's important that you kind of do a little refresher on your English grammar so that you can discern what the Hebrew and Greek is trying to do. So you're never going to, at least for the most part, you're never going to have a verb in the Greek translated as a noun in the English. Or you're never going to have an independent clause in the Greek translated as a dependent clause in English. So those things tend to be the same, and you can start to discern, you saw an independent clause, so what does that mean? They're interpreting an independent clause from the Greek. So the point is that's why it's important for you to pick up some of those things. If you can't even pick it up what it is in English, you're not going to discern why that would be important in terms of who was writing it in the original language. So so those are the first 2 questions. The first question is 10 points or 10 things on the parts of speech matching, and then the second question is matching independent or dependent clause. The third question is much shorter and much more simple. The third question is essentially, where does the prepositional phrase beginning with in the verse below end? And then it gives you a verse. So it says, where does the prepositional phrase beginning with in, the word in the verse below end? So it then gives you a verse, and you're simply having to point out with what word does it end with, and you just fill that in the blank there. So you're essentially showing that you know how long a prepositional phrase um, goes for. So when you're reading a sentence, that's important to know, like how long a phrase is. So question 4 is, what part of speech is since? Be specific. And then it gives you another verse. So the question is, what part of speech is since? And so since isn't always going to be the same in every verse, in every sentence or verse that you're looking at. But in the verse that we give you, it is a specific part of speech that you need to write in. It's not fill in the blank or matching. You actually have to know what it is. But the parts of speech are all kind of on the first question, so you'll know you're kind of choosing from one of those. But hopefully you can accurately discern what the correct answer is. That's it. I gave you as much info as I possibly could on that. So that's the English grammar exam. Very simple and straightforward. Now, the ISA number 1 background summary. What you're going to do is read this article, Silva's Introduction to Philippians. So just click on that right there. And so he writes a whole commentary. You're simply reading his introduction to Philippians portion of the commentary. And then what you're doing is summarizing it in a 2-page double-spaced paper. So it's kind of like giving a book report on just one portion of a book. You're not giving a summary of the book of Philippians. I want to make that absolutely clear. This is not a summary on the book of Philippians. What you are doing is you're summarizing in a 2-page double-spaced paper, which is almost nothing. So no, it better not be less than 2 pages. If it's just short of 2 pages, it's fine. But I don't want it more than 3. So don't write me a 5-page paper here. That's the skill that you're showing. I want you to summarize his introduction to Philippians. So it's you're not using Silva's commentary, his intro to Philippians, to summarize the entire book of Philippians. You are summarizing what Silva says. Now, Silva is giving kind of an intro to the entire book. So he isn't just focusing on the first chapter or something else. So it doesn't mean that you can't touch on potentially multiple things that are at work in the book of Philippians, but you're not looking to give me some perfect summary of Philippians. You're interacting not with Philippians, but with Silva. So in your language, you should be speaking in Silva's commentary, he argues this, or he presents this idea. You're speaking as if you're talking about Silva. I've had many students on this assignment say the book of Philippians is about this, and in Philippians, blah blah blah. So it doesn't seem like there's an understanding from many students that Silva is presenting ideas and you're interacting with Silva after reading his commentary. You're not using Silva to make an authority riddled statement on the book of Philippians. Although there is great insight from Silva. The point is that you're interacting with Silva. So make it very clear in your writing that Silva said this, Silva said that, and so forth. So, works cited. Okay. If you do cite works in the paper, include a works cited page, but you don't have to cite works. You're just interacting with Silva. It's very simple. Very simple, simple, simple. Here's what people get also confused with when we put in this sentence. Also, include a bibliography of at least 10 scholarly sources for the book of Philippians on a separate attached page. All this is this is basically a separate assignment. It kind of seems confusing because we kind of put it into this, but what we're wanting you to do here is be able to find 10 scholarly sources for the book of Philippians. That's it. And so that's a skill when you're doing interpretive study, is that you're able to find multiple resources for a book, in this case Philippians, and show that you know how to find those to be able to bring those into your study of the book. So this has nothing to do with Silva. Silva is essentially a scholarly source on the book of Philippians. You cannot include Silva in your list and your bibliography, and you do not need to use any of the sources you find in your list in your paper. So that's not what it is. This is a separate assignment on the book of Philippians, and you're not even doing anything with the sources you find. You're simply making a bibliography that shows that you can find sources. So you don't need to use the sources for anything. You're definitely not using these sources in your summary of Silva's commentary. You are simply showing that you can find 10 scholarly sources like Silva's for Philippians. Does that make sense? I hope so. Let me know if it doesn't. But that is pretty straightforward once I explain it. So that is the main thrust, and you basically just form it like any other works cited page, alphabetical order. And this is a good opportunity to use the ATLA religion database like you have done before. So that that is probably the easiest thing to do. We've done that many times and used it many times already this year. So the ATLA religion database, you can actually just search for Philippians. Just write in Philippians, and you can find probably 10 scholarly sources. So you're not looking for blogs, Wikipedia, weak non-scholarly sources. But I mean, I've mentioned many times Wikipedia can be a good resource. It's just not considered a scholarly resource. It's an online free encyclopedia. So find 10 scholarly sources like journal articles, respected commentaries. So not like the free Matthew Henry 500-year-old commentary that you can look up on Google. That's not a good scholarly source. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. Let me know if you have questions. And then ISA number 2 is create notes on chapter 2 of Klein using the notes template in the lesson 3 resource folder. Notes should represent a summary of the major elements from each section of the chapter included on the template. Okay, so all you're really doing here is, well, you go into the lesson 3 resource folder. I need to hurry, I'm running out of time. It cuts me off in 15 minutes. I thought I had it open already, so let me just go ahead and open it. Go into the lesson 3 resource folder. That's taking me a while to open it. All right, it's open. So you go in there, and then you'll see all the other things for this week that are in there. But you click on that notes template for ISA number 2. I've already done that and downloaded it here, and here it is. So you just fill this in, and so you'll just go through and you literally fill in these boxes. That's where you fill in the info. So that first section, you've got the Jewish interpretation, introduction. You give a 1-paragraph summary of what this introduction was about on Jewish interpretation. So that's kind of putting it into your own words, but essentially showing that you're interacting with the Klein reading. Fill that in. And then Hellenistic Judaism. What was the major emphasis of Hellenistic Judaism? What was Philo's view? So it's pretty straightforward. Qumran community, the Qumran community. So what was it saying about Qumran in the Old Testament? And then Pesher, a description of the 3 interpretive techniques associated with this approach. So you're gonna, as you write, you'll notice that these blocks get bigger. So it's going to be a bigger document when you get done. But that's all you have to do. I mean, even if there's not a block, you still have to fill stuff in, right? So the Middle Ages, description of interpretive methods. What were all the interpretive methods in the Middle Ages? Description of Bible's 4 senses. So just fill it in. You just go through the Klein reading straightforward. It's just showing that you really did the work in Klein, and we're forcing you to take notes in it. That's all that is. All right, so, and finally, really quickly on the discussion board this week, is describe the way in which God participates in the interpretive process. Of all the Christian practices, prayer, giving, community, which do you find most helpful to your interpretive process? So there's obviously more than just prayer, giving, and community. So describe to me, what do you find most helpful to your interpretive process? What helps you as you're taking the scripture? Is it the dynamics? I mean, we most often think of like teaching and prayer, and that can be huge for you if that's the main things. Spend your time on it, but don't just flippantly go off for 5 seconds on it. Take some time and really think about it, and then why do you feel you need to incorporate as you grow as an interpreter? Talk to me about what you need to grow in. That's it.